And we back. Today we're doing another one of those Let's Argue videos. It was an idea inspired by Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd. He has a series on one of his channels where he has his fans tweet him their most unpopular music opinions, and where he sit down and he argues with them. A very civil argument. It doesn't get heated or anything, but I like that idea so much that I decided to make an NBA version of that. So I went onto Twitter and said, tweet me your most unpopular opinions. I picked some that I disagree with, and we're gonna sit down and talk about why I disagree. Again, everything I say in this video is my personal opinion. Hopefully you find some entertainment in it. Let's get to the first one. The first one comes from the Jesus Shuttleworth, who says the only reason Jordan has 6 rings and no loss in the finals was because he kept getting the top-notch free agents like the Warriors. All right, for a minute, I didn't know if this was him trolling or he was being serious. It legitimately could be a troll, but we're gonna act like it's a real opinion and we're gonna argue with it. No. We could literally leave it at that, but let me go more into depth onto why this is a no. That Bulls team, the Bulls teams that Jordan led to a championship, most of the players on our roster were either A, drafted by the Bulls, or B, just role players. We never got a top name free agent. We got Dennis Rodman, but even when we got him, he was 33 years old. He was only averaging 5 points per game. Again, I started watching basketball in 2003. I wasn't born until 1996. So everything I know about the Bulls, this Bulls era, the dynasty, was what I read in books, saw on TV, and documentaries. So correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my memory of how this Bulls team was orchestrated. They drafted well, and they signed nice role players. Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Tony Kukoc, those are all drafted Bulls players. We did get Harper later in his career. I mean, the year before he came to Chicago, he averaged like 20 points per game, and then he got to Chicago and he averaged like 9. So if that's what you consider a top free agent, then I guess, but it's not true. The Bulls teams that went 6-0 that Jordan led primarily were drafted by the Bulls. And then this gives off the connotation that what the Warriors is doing right now is bad. The Warriors are doing exactly what all other 29 teams wish they were doing. They drafted well, and then they're also bringing in top free agents. You think your favorite team wouldn't love to have got Kevin Durant? I promise you, they would have. So the only reason that they got this, it just makes it seem like it's a negative thing, but the Warriors, what they're doing as far as team building is amazing, and that's not true. Jordan, the teams that he led, mostly was drafted by us, and we never really got a top-notch free agent. It's always been Scottie and Jordan. Xavier says Isaiah Thomas will be out of the league if he can't bounce back with the Nuggets. And this got 7 likes, so that means 7 other people agree with him. And the reason I don't think this is true, because even if he doesn't bounce back, and I'm guessing when he says bounce back, he means like becomes very good. Because even when he got to LA, let's be real, when Isaiah Thomas got to LA, he was an okay player. And really, if he's just an okay player, that is enough to have a roster spot. There are plenty of players in the league that are not as good as Isaiah Thomas if he's being an okay player. So I don't think he ever bounced back to being an all-star. I think that's wishing a lot. But to be a solid role player on the team, Isaiah Thomas can do that. This gives off the idea that he's got 1 more year to prove himself, when in reality, it was just 2 years ago he was an MVP candidate. He had one season where he was not a productive player. And y'all are already trying to kick him out of the league. Give him time. Give him time. And even if he doesn't, again, I don't think he will bounce back to be an all-star. Being a 6th man, a 7th man, or even 8th man on the roster is perfect. So I don't think he'll be out of the league. Not after next year, at least. Steven Adams says Steven Adams is a top 5 center in the NBA. Again, this is obviously not the real Steven Adams, but I do not agree with this. Steven Adams is a very good NBA player, but top 5 is really reaching it. Right now, I put together a list for a video for House of Highlights, my podcast through the wire, where we're ranking the top 50 NBA players in the league. And the way I started this is let me give my top 10 centers, my top 10 power forwards, shooting guards, small forwards, and point guards. Steven Adams made my top 10 center list, but I promise you he was not top 5. I'm not going to spoil you my list just yet, but I'm just going to name 5 centers that I believe are better than him right now. Joel Embiid, DeMarcus Cousins, Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Nikola Jokic. Those are just 5 right now off the top of my head that I believe are better than Steven Adams. Again, Steven Adams is a very good NBA player, very productive NBA player, but top 5 is kind of reaching it. And honestly, I was going to say this comes into just general fandom, but there are also 8 people that agree with him. I don't think he's that high. JJ Coakley says, a player with great defense but bad offense is just as great as a player with great offense and bad defense. Example, Andre Roberson is just as good as Damian Lillard. The old saying is, defense wins championships. So maybe that's the route you're going. I'm going to have to disagree. Andre Roberson is a very important part of his team. If Andre Roberson plays in the playoffs last year, maybe they get out of the first round, and because Andre Roberson can defend Donovan Mitchell, which prevents Donovan Mitchell from averaging 27. Perfect. But I cannot in 100 years say that that makes him as good of a player as Damian Lillard. Because though Damian Lillard is not a good defending player, he's going to give you at least 25 a game, and I promise you he's not giving up 25 on the defensive side of the ball, which means that he's going to positively impact his team even if he's a bad defender. When was the last time a player that is strictly defense like Andre Roberson has led a team to the playoffs? I was going to say to a championship, but that's reaching it. When was the last time a player that was strictly defense led a team to the playoffs? Has not happened. But when was the last time a player that was strictly offensive has led a team to the playoffs? It happens a couple times a year. So though Andre Roberson is super valuable to his team, and he'll be super valuable to almost any team that he plays on from here on out for his career because he's such a great defender, I cannot say that that makes him as good of a player as somebody that is so great offensively. James Harden was laughed at for seasons at a time because he did not play a lick of defense. But he continued to lead his team to the playoffs, and eventually he won an MVP. So I don't agree with this whatsoever. Yes, defensive players are super, super important, but offense is more important if you ask me. Mr. Swiss says Tobias Harris will be an all-star next NBA season. The reason I don't agree with this, even though Tobias Harris has got better every single year of his career, is because, well, he's got to beat out a lot of players to make the all-star game. Though there's a new format. There's a new format where it's not East versus West. There's still X amount of players from the East that make it and X amount of players from the West that make it. Tobias Harris is going to have to beat out a lot of players. So here are the rosters from the all-star game from last year. Again, it's X amount of players from the East and X amount of players from the West. So Tobias Harris is going to have to beat out players like Stephen Curry, DeMar DeRozan because he's out West now, James Harden, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Damian Lillard, Klay Thompson, Karl-Anthony Towns, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, LaMarcus Aldridge, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and did I say DeMarcus already? He's going to have to beat out one of those players for an all-star spot. And honestly, I don't see it happening. I don't see an all-star appearance in his near future. I just don't see that. Unless somebody gets injured, but even if somebody gets injured, I'm sure there are going to be other players other than Tobias Harris to be the one to fill the roster spot. So I'm going to say no, Tobias Harris will not be an all-star next year. Eric Wilkerson says, coaches are overvalued in the league and are glorified babysitters to keep players' egos under control. Eric, you have a good point here. I think that the main job of a coach is to keep players' egos under control, but I don't think that makes them overvalued, because if you have a coach that does not do that part of their job correctly, well, your team will not get along and your team will not be successful. So though this is a huge part of their resume, of their job description, controlling players' egos, it is extremely important to team success. You have guys like Greg Popovich, who until this year or last year has never really had a controversial thing to happen in his locker room. That is not overvalued if you ask me. Because, well, they continue to be a good team for 20 years. And then you have other coaches that are the play callers. And if you're a great play calling coach, for example, Brad Stevens, you're not overvalued. if you take Brad Stevens away from the Boston Celtics, they'll still be a good team. But will they be the team in the Eastern Conference Finals last year? Maybe not. You could take Greg Popovich away from the Spurs. Would they have made the playoffs last year? Maybe not. If you take Eric Spoelstra away from the Miami Heat, do they make the playoffs last year? Probably not. So yes, part of their job description is to keep players' egos under control, but it is extremely important for team success. Not many bad coaches get far. Tyronn Lue would probably be the only example I can think of, but he had the best player of our generation on his team. So he can afford to be a bad coach because LeBron was there. But if Tyronn Lue was coaching some other teams, we'd be looking at him as a terrible coach and not a coach that has an NBA championship. And that's it. That's how we're going to end the video, guys. Thank y'all so much. I got hundreds and hundreds of responses, so I tried to pick ones that I thought were good enough to debate about. A lot of the questions I got were pertaining to the future. This player will never win a championship, or this player will never reach his potential. And though those are okay opinions to have, for me personally, I don't like those questions because anything can happen in the NBA. A player that has amazing potential could get injured and his career could be practically over. So I don't want to come out here and tell you, man, you tripping because this player's going to be a superstar. And then the next day he tears ACL and he's not the same. Or somebody's like, this team won't make the playoffs. I'm gonna be like, dude, you tripping. That team is definitely making the playoffs. And then their star player goes down and they don't. So I don't like the whole trying to predict the future videos. I try to take a step back and compare players or things like that. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed it. Even if you disagree with everything I said in this video, I hope you found some enjoyment. If you got to this point, there had to be something you enjoyed. So leave a like. I'll be back very, very soon. Peace.